You are watching the world fall apart, and most people are running, scrambling, panicking, reaching for something. Anything. That still feels solid. But there is a very small number of people who do not run. They stop, they breathe, and they watch. Not because they are brave, because they understand something fundamental about how power actually moves. Power does not flow through stability. It flows through collapse. The strongest hands in history, not the most moral, not the most talented. The strongest have always been the ones who learned this first. They learned it when everything else was burning. This is not a video about motivation. This is not about becoming a better person. This is about understanding the architecture of chaos and learning exactly how certain individuals have, throughout all of history, turned destruction into dominance. Machiavelli understood this before almost anyone else did. He lived it, he was exiled, imprisoned. And from that wreckage, he wrote the most dangerous strategic document ever put to paper. Not because it taught people how to be good, because it taught them how to be effective. There is a difference. And most people have spent their entire lives pretending that difference does not exist. It does. And today, I am going to break it open for you. 7 laws, each one a principle Machiavelli identified, directly or implicitly, for how power is seized, held, and expanded during periods of disorder. These are not motivational frameworks. These are cold observations about how the game actually works. If you are not ready to look at this clearly, leave now. But if you want to understand why certain people always seem to come out on top when everything else is falling apart, stay, because the answer is not luck. It is strategy. Law 1. Chaos is the only open door. Let me tell you something that most people will never accept. During stable times, the game is closed. The hierarchy is set. The rules are defined. The pathways to influence are narrow, heavily guarded, and controlled by the people who already sit at the top. You can grind, you can perform. You can dedicate your entire life to playing by the established rules. And you will, at best, rise incrementally. You will climb the structure that someone else built. You will fill the role someone else designed. That is not power. That is employment. True power, the kind that reshapes environments, that bends other people's behavior without them even realizing it. That power does not emerge from order. It emerges from disorder. When a system collapses, whether that is a civilization, an industry, a social structure, or even a single relationship, the old rules stop working overnight. The people who controlled access to advantage suddenly find that their advantages mean nothing. And in that vacuum, in that brief, violent window where no one knows the new rules yet, something extraordinary happens. The door opens. Machiavelli saw this in Renaissance Italy. The Italian city-states were being torn apart by foreign invasion. France, Spain, the Holy Roman Empire, all pressing inward at the same time. Florence, where Machiavelli lived and worked, was consumed by factional warfare. The Medici family rose to dominance, not because they were the most virtuous rulers in Italian history. They rose because they moved fastest when the ground was collapsing beneath everyone else. This is the first law. Chaos is not something to survive. It is something to enter. The people who treat disruption as a threat will always be one step behind. The people who recognize disruption as the only moment when real repositioning becomes possible. They are the ones who envy, up, holding the keys to whatever comes next. This does not mean you manufacture chaos. That is a different and far more dangerous proposition. It means you stop fearing it. It means you develop the ability to read instability in markets, in organizations, in social dynamics, and recognize it for what it is. An opening. Most people freeze when things break. The ones who move slowly, deliberately, with complete clarity about what they want, those are the ones who inherit the rubble. And rubble, when you know what to build with it, is worth more than the original structure ever was. Law 2. Fear is a currency. Use it or be spent by it. Machiavelli asked one of the most uncomfortable questions in the history of political thought. Is it better to be loved or feared? Most people instinctively choose love. It feels warmer, it feels safer, it feels like the right answer. Machiavelli disagreed. Not because he was cruel, because he was observant. Love, he argued, is fragile. It is based on obligation, on reciprocity, on the other person deciding every single day that maintaining their attachment to you serves their interests. The moment it stops serving them, love dissolves. Fear is different. Fear is consistent. It does not depend on mood. It does not fluctuate with circumstance. It is a constant force that shapes behavior, whether the person experiencing it is happy, sad, resentful, indifferent now. And this is critical. Machiavelli was not advocating cruelty for its own sake. He made a sharp distinction. Fear that breeds hatred is destructive. It turns every person in your environment into an enemy waiting for the right moment to strike back. But fear that is rooted in competence, in the understanding that you will act decisively when action is required, that is a different animal entirely. That is respect wearing a darker mask. Think about the people in your life who you have never crossed. Not because you love them, because you know instinctively, without needing a demonstration, that the consequences of crossing them would be immediate and severe. That is fear operating as currency, and it buys influence that affection never could. This does not mean becoming a tyrant. It means becoming someone whose boundaries, whose standards, and whose responses are so clearly defined that other people adjust their behavior around you without you having to ask. The people who command this kind of presence are not loud. They are not aggressive. They are simply unambiguous. And ambiguity, in a world full of people desperately trying to please everyone, ambiguity is the rarest form of power there is. Machiavelli understood that in periods of chaos, the person who is most feared is also the person who is most free, because no one dares to test them. No one dares to undermine them. No one dares to look away. Fear, when wielded with precision, is not a weapon of destruction. It is a shield that allows you to build without interference. Law 3. Appearance is the actual game. Reality is secondary. Here is where most people's understanding of power breaks down completely. They believe that if they are good, truly good, genuinely skilled, honestly decent, the world will eventually recognize it. That talent will rise. That virtue will be rewarded. That truth will surface. Machiavelli would look at that belief and call it what it is: a fantasy. The world does not reward what you are. It responds to what you appear to be. These are not the same thing, and the gap between them is where most people quietly lose the game of influence. Machiavelli wrote this with surgical precision. He observed that the masses, the overwhelming majority of people, will never have direct access to who you really are. They will never see your private decisions, your internal struggles, your actual motivations. What they see is the surface, the way you carry yourself, the language you use, the image you allow into the space between you and everyone else. And here is the uncomfortable truth. The image is all that matters to them. A leader who appears wise but is privately incompetent will often outperform a leader who is genuinely brilliant but appears uncertain. A person who projects calm authority in a room will be trusted over someone who is intellectually superior but visibly anxious. The game is not about what is real. The game is about what is perceived. Now, this is not the same as lying. Machiavelli was not advocating for fraudulent behavior in the way we typically understand it. He was pointing at something deeper. He was saying that every person who holds real influence has, consciously or not, constructed an image, a version of themselves that is strategically curated for the environment they operate in. The only difference between those who do it deliberately and those who do it accidentally is control. Think about every powerful figure you have ever studied, every leader, every executive, every person who wielded influence at scale. Every single one of them had a public self that was distinct from their private self. Not contradictory, distinct. The public self was engineered. It was calibrated for maximum impact in the spaces where it would be seen. The private self, the real self, the messy, uncertain, deeply human self, was kept behind closed doors. And this was not weakness. It was architecture. The people who blur these two selves, who believe that authenticity and power are compatible in the public sphere, almost always discover that they are not. Because authentic behavior is authentic behavior, unpredictable. It is raw. It invites scrutiny. And scrutiny, in a world where perception is the actual currency, is a vulnerability you cannot afford. Machiavelli understood this. He said that everyone can see what you appear to be. Very few experience what you actually are. And the few who do, they are the ones you choose. You select that inner circle. You do not leave it to chance. During chaos, specifically, this law becomes almost violent in its importance. When systems collapse, people lose their reference points. They do not know who to trust. They do not know what is safe. They are looking desperately for someone who appears to have answers. They do not need someone who actually has all the answers. They need someone who looks like they do. The person who can hold composure, who can project certainty into an environment of total uncertainty, becomes the gravitational center around which others organize themselves. Not because of what they know, because of how they appear. Machiavelli understood that in the battle for influence, perception is not a supplement to power. It is the foundation. Law 4. Loyalty is a transaction. Treat it like one. This one will make some people uncomfortable. Discomfort is where understanding begins. Here is what Machiavelli observed about loyalty. The kind of loyalty that people build entire identities around. The kind they believe is the highest form of human connection. It is conditional, always. Not sometimes. Not in extreme cases. Always. Loyalty is not a fixed state. It is an ongoing calculation. Every person who pledges allegiance to you, whether in business, in politics, in personal relationships, in any arena at all, is MITI, performing a continuous, mostly unconscious assessment. Does staying loyal to this person serve my interests? When the answer is yes, the loyalty holds. When the answer becomes no, the loyalty breaks quietly. Often without any warning, often without any acknowledgement. Machiavelli saw this play out in the courts of Renaissance Italy constantly. Allies who swore unbreakable bonds during periods of shared power would turn on each other the moment the balance shifted. It was not malice, it was mechanics. Human beings are self-interested organisms. This is not a judgment. It is an observation, and the people who refuse to accept it, who insist on believing that loyalty is absolute, that trust is unconditional, that the people around them will always have their back. Those people are not noble, they are vulnerable. The fourth law does not say trust no one. That is paranoia. And paranoia is its own form of weakness. The fourth law says, understand exactly what loyalty is. Understand that it is a transaction, and structure your relationships, your alliances, your professional networks, your inner circle, way that acknowledges this reality. Make it worthwhile for people to stay loyal, not through guilt, not through emotional manipulation, through genuine, mutual benefit. The leaders who maintain loyal followings through periods of chaos do not do it by inspiring devotion. They do it by making themselves indispensable. They become the person whose presence in your life creates more value than their absence. And they understand, with complete clarity, that the moment they stop being that person, the loyalty evaporates. It is the foundation of every durable alliance in history. Machiavelli did not invent this dynamic. He simply had the honesty to name it. And naming it clearly without sentiment is the first step toward mastering it. Law 5, strike completely, or do not strike at all. There is a particular kind of failure that Machiavelli identified as the most dangerous of all. Not the failure of someone who never tried. Not the failure of someone who tried and lost honorably. The failure of someone who struck and did not strike hard enough. This is the law that separates strategic thinkers from everyone else. Most people, when they decide to act against an obstacle, whether that is a competitor, an enemy, a limiting belief, a relationship that has become toxic, they strike with restraint. They hold back. They tell themselves they are being reasonable, being measured, being civilized. And their enemy survives. Machiavelli wrote about this with absolute clarity. He argued that when you must injure an opponent, when the situation demands that you act against someone who threatens your position, you have exactly two options. Option 1, do not act at all. Maintain peace. Find another way. Option 2, act with such completeness that the threat is extinguished permanently. There is no third option. The middle path, the half strike, the partial victory. The wound that is deep enough to cause pain, but not deep enough to end the threat. That middle path is not strategy. It is the creation of an enemy who now has every reason to destroy you. Because you have shown them that you are willing to act, and you have shown them that you are not willing to finish. That is the most dangerous combination possible. Machiavelli understood that in the context of chaos, where power structures are already unstable, where alliances are shifting daily, a half measure is worse than inaction. If you move against a rival and leave them standing, you have given them both the motivation and the opportunity to respond. If you do not move at all, at least you have preserved the relationship or maintained neutrality. But if you move and fail to complete the action, you have created an adversary with a wound that will never heal and a grievance that will drive everything they do going forward. This law applies far beyond literal conflict. In business, it is the competitor you tried to undercut but did not fully outmaneuver. Now they know you are a threat, and they are focused entirely on neutralizing you. In relationships, it is the boundary you tried to set but did not enforce. Now, the other person knows your boundaries are suggestions, not walls. In personal development, It is the habit you tried to break, but did not fully eliminate. It returns stronger, more entrenched, more resistant to future attempts. And there is a psychological reason this pattern is so persistent. When you strike at something, when you take action against an obstacle or an adversary, you introduce information into the system. You reveal your intentions. You show your hand. A complete action closes the loop. The information you revealed is absorbed into the outcome. The action and its result become one event, but an incomplete action leaves the loop open. The information you revealed, your willingness to act, your priorities, your vulnerabilities in the process, that information now exists. Without information, resolution, and it will be used against you. This is why Machiavelli was so emphatic about this principle. He was not talking about aggression as a personality trait. He was talking about the relationship between information and consequence. Every action you take releases information. The question is whether that information serves you or exposes you, complete action or no action. That is the law, and it requires something that most people have been trained out of their entire lives. It requires the willingness to be ruthless, not in the sense of being cruel, but in the sense of being thorough, of following through, of refusing to stop halfway because the process made you uncomfortable. Machiavelli did not call this evil. He called it necessary. Law 6, control the narrative. Oregon, be written by someone else. Every person alive is a character in a story. You did not choose this. Someone else, society, culture, the people around you, the algorithm that feeds you information. Someone else is already writing your story. They are deciding what you mean to the people who encounter you. They are framing your actions. They are defining your place in whatever larger narrative is unfolding around you. And most people are not even aware this is happening. Machiavelli understood that power over narrative is power over reality itself, not symbolic power, not cultural influence in the abstract, actual, operational power, because the story that surrounds a person determines how others treat them. It determines who approaches them and who avoids them. It determines what opportunities are offered, and what opportunities are offered are denied, often before a single conversation takes place. In periods of instability, this becomes even more acute, when people do not have the luxury of spending time evaluating you directly, when everything is moving too fast for deep assessment. They rely entirely on the story that precedes you, your reputation, your framing, the version of you that exists in the minds of the people who matter. If you have not built that version deliberately, someone else has built it for you, and they did not build it to serve your interests. This is not about propaganda. It is not about deception. It is about authorship, Machiavelli argued, and history has validated this repeatedly, that the leaders who endure are not always the most capable. They are the ones who control how their actions are interpreted. A victory can be framed as heroism or as brutality. The same decision can be painted as wisdom or as arrogance. The same silence can be read as confidence or as guilt. The interpretation is not objective. It is constructed, and the person who constructs it first, who establishes the frame before anyone else can impose one, controls the entire conversation. Consider how this works. In practice, two executives make the same decision. The company loses money in the short term. One of them has already planted the narrative. We are investing in the future. This quarter is a bridge, not a failure. The other has said nothing, left the interpretation to the room. The first executive walks out of the crisis looking prescient. The second walks out looking incompetent. The decision was identical. The outcome was determined entirely by who controlled the story first. And this is not manipulation in the crude sense. It is awareness. It is the understanding that meaning is never inherent in an action. Meaning is always assigned. And it is always assigned someone. The only question is whether that someone is you during collapse. This becomes the single most valuable skill a person can possess. Because when systems break down, people are not looking for the truth. They are looking for a story that makes sense of what is happening. And whoever provides that story, whoever steps into the vacuum of meaning and says, this is what is occurring, and this is why, that person becomes the lens through which everyone else understands reality. They are not simply influencing the game. They are defining it. Law 7. Fortune favors the prepared aggressor. Machiavelli devoted the final chapter of The Prince to a concept that has been misunderstood and distorted for 5 centuries. Fortune, not luck, not fate, not the random distribution of advantage that most people point to when they want to explain why some people win and others do not. Fortune, as Machiavelli defined it, is the force of circumstance. The external conditions you did not create and cannot fully control. The tide, the weather, the political landscape, the economy, the behavior of everyone around you. It is, in his words, like a flooding river. During calm weather, you can walk along its banks. You can even cross it. You can navigate around it with patience and planning. But when the river floods, when fortune turns violent and unpredictable, patience and planning alone are not enough. Machiavelli argued that fortune governs roughly half of human affairs. The other half, he said, is governed by human will, and here is the critical insight that almost everyone misses. The ratio is not fixed. Fortune's power over your life is not constant. It fluctuates. Sometimes circumstances dominate, sometimes individual action dominates, and the balance between them shifts, often without warning. But there is one condition under which human will almost always gains the upper hand. Preparation, not passive preparation. Not the kind of preparation that means, I have a plan for when things go well. The kind that means, I have studied the patterns, I have built the capacity, I have positioned myself, so that when the flood comes, when fortune turns violent, I am already on higher ground. And then, critically, when the flood does come, they do not simply defend, they advance. Machiavelli wrote that fortune most often defeats those who resist her passively, the people who simply try to hold on, who dig in and wait for the storm to pass. Fortune destroys them, not because they were weak, but because they were reactive. The ones who survive, and more than survive, the ones who expand their position during periods of chaos, are the ones who meet fortune with aggression. Not reckless aggression. Prepared aggression. The kind that comes from understanding exactly what the disruption will create. What gaps will open? What power will shift? What opportunities will exist for exactly one brief window? And being ready to move into those gaps before anyone else even recognizes they are there. This is the law that ties everything else together. Chaos is the open door, but only if you are already standing near it when it opens. Fear is currency, but only if you have earned the respect that makes fear meaningful. Appearance is the game, but only if you have built an image that can withstand the pressure of crisis. Loyalty is a transaction, but only if you have structured your alliances to activate under stress, not collapse under it. Complete action is required, but only if you have the clarity and the capacity to act decisively when the moment arrives. Narrative control is essential, but only if you have prepared the story before the crisis demands one. All of these laws converge at a single point: preparation, not comfort, not hope, not the vague belief that things will work out. Preparation, the cold, deliberate, unglamorous work of understanding what is coming or what might come, and arranging every element of your life, your mind, your position, and your capacity, so that when the ground shifts, you are the one who moves. Let me be direct with you. Everything I have described in this video, these 7 laws, they are not moral instructions. They are not guidelines for being a better human being. They are observations. Cold, accurate observations about how power behaves during periods of instability, about how certain individuals have, across thousands of years and dozens of civilizations, positioned themselves to emerge from collapse not as survivors, but as the ones who shape what comes after. Machiavelli did not create these patterns. He simply had the clarity and the courage to write them down. And most people, most intelligent, educated, thoughtful people, have spent their entire lives refusing to look at them directly, because they are uncomfortable, because they contradict the stories we tell ourselves about how the world works, about fairness, about merit, about the belief that goodness is always rewarded and virtue always rises. It is not reliably, not consistently, not in the way we want it to be. Power moves through chaos. It flows into vacuums. It responds to fear before it responds to love. It is shaped by appearance before it is shaped by reality. It is sustained by transactions, not sentiment. It requires completeness, not half measures. It is controlled by narrative, not by fact alone. And it is seized, always, by those who prepared for the disruption, while everyone else was still believing it could not happen. You have a choice. You can continue operating under the assumption that the world is fair, that hard work and good intentions are sufficient, that if you just keep doing the right thing, the right outcome will follow. Some people live their entire lives inside that assumption, and some of them are happy genuinely. But they are not the ones who hold power. They are not the ones who define the environments other people inhabit. They are not the ones Machiavelli wrote about. Or you can begin slowly, deliberately, without any illusion about what this understanding will cost you in terms of comfort. You can begin to see the architecture, the real architecture, the one underneath the polished surface that society presents as reality, the one where chaos is not the enemy, it is the raw material. Machiavelli wrote The Prince in Exile, after losing everything, after being imprisoned and tortured and discarded by the very system he had served. He did not write it out of bitterness. He wrote it because he finally understood, with absolute clarity, how the game actually worked, and he wanted someone to know. Not everyone, not the masses who would be disturbed by it. Someone who could look at the truth without flinching. Someone who could hold this knowledge and use it, not to destroy, but to position. Not to manipulate mindlessly, but to understand the forces at work and navigate them with precision. That someone could be you, but only if you are willing to do what most people will not. Only if you are willing to look at power, real power, the kind that actually moves the world, and accept what you see, without judgment, without flinching, without the comfortable lie that it does not apply to you. It applies to everyone. The only variable is whether you understand it. He never regained power, but the document he wrote from that exile has shaped the behavior of rulers, leaders, and strategists for over 500 years. He lost the game, but he wrote the manual.